My name is Volodymyr Zelensky. You're probably wondering how I got here.
In this video, Steven Crowder absolutely nails the Russia-Ukraine conversation. Mark Rubio shuts down Kaitlan Collins. Tim Burchett once again makes a clown out of Jake Tapper. Stephen Miller goes off on the Jesse Waters show. Scott Jennings crushes a panel of low-IQ Democrats. Susan Rice peddles propaganda that this was a big setup by President Trump and the White House. And Elon Musk wants to know where the money is that we sent to Ukraine. Let's get it. Absolutely jam-packed video for you guys today. As the left tries to say that this was a setup by President Trump and the White House, what happened with the Zelensky meeting, saying that there's no way that Zelensky disrespected Donald Trump. Look at what you're watching on the screen. This is total disrespect. That body language is disrespectful. And anybody can see that. Even the Ukraine ambassador was embarrassed and knew that Zelensky should just shut the hell up. After the meeting, Mark Rubio cut off all funding to Ukraine's energy grid. You F around and you find out. The first clips you're going to watch here are one of Zelensky talking while Elon Musk tweets out, maybe it's time that we find out where the hundreds of billions of dollars that we gave to the Ukraine went to, followed by Steven Crowder absolutely nailing the Russia-Ukraine conflict debate. We got Scott Jennings, followed by Tim Burchett making a clown, once again, of Jake Tapper. Let's get to it.
Military equipment. No, it can't be so. 100 billions we've got during 3 years.
183 from the U.S.
Yeah. Now, on the paper, in the documents, yes. But we have, in fact, because 67 came like a weapon. It came through the border. It's checked and it's fixed by everybody, and we shared it not once with the American side. And 31.5, it was direct financial support to the budget. Again, it's very open. It's digitalized. It's open, free, and please, if somebody wants to check it again, we are very, very open with this.
Last thing.
Just watched the exchange with Zelensky and President Trump, Vance. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. Have you?
No. Not in public.
No, not in public. Look, here's the thing. Okay, and people want to act like you're either Ukraine or you're Russia, you're Putin. I can't stand Putin. Do I think he's former KGB? Yeah. Do I think he's a totalitarian? Yeah. Do I think he's interested in freedom? Absolutely not. Don't like the way that he went into Ukraine. I think he'll take anything he can get. All right. But Zelensky is more indicative of the pervasive problem that we're dealing with. Whether it's NATO, whether it's the UN, whether it's the rest of Europe, whether it's Canada, this idea that it's a never-ending supply of support from the United States while you bitch about it. This has to start with some semblance of truth, okay? Without the United States, guess what? You're Russia, Ukraine. That was the law of the land. That's what happened. Stronger nations conquered weaker nations. All of these modern comforts that people take for granted, they are entirely supported by the United States and our military. Not a nation in Europe, certainly not Ukraine, certainly not Canada. And that is the mindset that emboldens people like Putin, because they know at a certain point that well runs dry. Does that make sense? Does that make someone pro-Russia to acknowledge there's no winning here, and there's certainly no winning without the United States? And if you accept those truths, probably not a good idea to walk into the Oval Office and be a dick. Here's how you know he's not being honest, Zelensky. First off, everything is a photo. He rubs me the wrong way, okay? Can't stand Putin, got it? Zelensky rubs me the wrong way. Why? Because he's walking around in the same outfit like he's cartoon Steve Jobs, and he's working for a book deal after this. None of it seems genuine. And he sits and he says, we have been strong since day one, and we have been alone. They haven't been strong since day one. They've been getting, this has been a shellacking, and everyone has been with them since day one. None of those statements are honest. How many Ukraine flags on X, on Instagram? How many hundreds of billions of dollars, largely from the United States and other nations, for you to say, oh, well, maybe you haven't been alone? Please, thank you. These are the words that people might like to hear when you come down. Our motherfucking
premeditated.
I don't know.
I think Zelensky misplayed it in the room, and you can and we could disagree about J.D. Vance's position on it or agree on it, but either way, Zelensky certainly had been briefed on what the right way to handle this was, and all he had to do was walk in there and say, thank you, I'm really grateful to be here. We want to be partners with the United States. We're grateful for your leadership. Where's the papers, and what are we having for lunch? That's all he had to do. And look, the posturing doesn't have to occur now. If he is serious about wanting peace and ending this war, you don't have to keep posturing as a tough guy. Everybody knows you're tough, all right? The Ukrainians are tough. They're brave. They're fighting a much larger country. Everybody knows. The question for Zelensky is, can you take off the military uniform and put on the uniform of diplomacy? He failed the test.
Really follow through on something, and he has not. So that was his point.
Well, I have a short answer on this. So the short answer is the Trump administration believes that if Ukraine goes into business with the United States, that in and of itself is a security guarantee. If your interests become our interests, we're going to be interested in making sure our interests are secure. So it would have been wise for him to understand the economic deal, the mineral deal, is a security guarantee in and of itself. And he lost sight of that today in the argument. The big picture here was lost because of an argument in the Oval Office, and that was a total misplay.
Time, you were worried about Putin watching President Biden, who was obviously not fit as a fiddle, and licking his chops. What do you think Putin's doing now? Because it does seem as though the United States position is to sidle up and ally with Russia and to criticize Ukraine.
Well, in the past, Putin was, obviously he was dealing with Biden, and he knew that Ukraine was stealing, at least by their own admission, half the money that we sent them. So, and now under Trump, they know that's going to stop, and the fighting will stop. So I don't see the equivalency there, other than that President Trump is going to stop the fighting, and he's stopping us throwing our money down a well over there in a war we have nothing to do with. So yeah, I stand by my previous statement, and it holds well.
I don't think it's accurate to say that Ukraine was stealing half the money over there.
Well, their own president said they don't know where half of it is. Now, you all got to get your facts straight, because everybody knows that. It's been reported in multiple news sources.
Congressman, as you know, most of the money that went to Ukraine was military aid, weapons that were manufactured and purchased in the United States.
So you're paying off the war pimps at the Pentagon to prolong this war. I mean, men are dying because of somebody's profit sheet, is what you're saying, and that's what this country is about, and that is wrong, and that needs to stop, and it's stopping under Trump, and that's why both sides are quietly pitching a fit right now, because they're not going to get rich off of young men dying and old men making terrible decisions, and that's exactly what's going on.
I think people are dying because Russia attacked Ukraine. I mean, I think that is the reason why people are dying.
At the beginning of that war, we were on both sides, if you haven't forgotten. We had gas contracts with Russia, and then we were giving money to Ukraine. So in effect, as the big bankers sometimes do, they played both sides of the coin. And that's why nobody's in a rush to get this thing going. So we ought to be at war because America's going to profit? Is that what you're saying? Because that sounds a whole lot like what you're saying. Well, you just said that the arms are being bought here in America, and dadgummit, so people should die. Why don't they just give that $200 billion to arms manufacturers, and then nobody dies? I mean, by your own admission, you're saying that that this is a profiteer situation, and that's exactly what it is, and it needs to stop.
I mean, you can put words in my mouth and then argue with them, but that doesn't mean I said them. What I said was the money wasn't. I was trying to explain what Zelensky meant when he said he'd like to see where that money went.
If he's in charge of that country and their finances, then dadgummit, why doesn't he know where the money went? That's what you're saying, and you can't have it. That is wrong. We're borrowing that money. Every dollar we gave to Ukraine is borrowed. We are borrowing that from our great-grandchildren. We're $36 trillion in debt. We have no business being over there, except a lot of people's stock portfolios is going through the roof. Do you know when we gave our missile defense system to Ukraine, that when President Biden, by executive order, did that members of Congress in both parties had stock in the missile defense company, and that was a multi-billion-dollar contract. That was a no-bid contract to replenish our missile supply. This thing is about dollars and cents, and they don't give a rip about young men dying.
So
that's the bottom line.
Conservatives, Republicans at the time praised President Trump for having the courage to send those Javelin missiles to Ukraine to fight Russia. Was
They
that
were in
was that a mistake?
They were in a defensive mode, not in an offensive mode, and that's a
You
complete
think
difference.
Ukraine is on the offense right now?
No, but those missiles are. That's what those missiles are for. Is defensive moves, not for offensive. Now it's unlimited. The money and supplies we're giving them or have given them, they're unchecked by Zelensky's own words. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, and you're not putting them in mine. Those are Zelensky's own words, that he doesn't know where that money went. So that should tell you some things about this whole war, what it's about. It's not about a conflict of freeing entrapped people. It's about making dollars.
Do you think that President Putin is responsible for this war beginning?
Absolutely, 100%. Putin's a thug. But again, where is all the outrage in the halls of Congress about the mistreatment of people by the Chinese? Nobody's going to go to war by them, and I'll tell you why. Because if you flip over every computer chip or everybody's tie, it's going to say "Made in China," because it's all about the dollars, brother. That's the only reason.
Stephen Crowder nailed that. You can think that Putin is a totalitarian dickhead, and you can also think that Zelensky is an ungrateful little prick. Like many things in life, two things can be true at once. Now let's get to Mark Rubio. He was just on CNN talking to Kaitlan Collins. I hate how she spells her name, but it is what it is. And he absolutely shuts down her narrative and debunks it, saying that, listen, Zelensky didn't have to come to Washington. The deal could have been signed days ago. We have a little tool called the internet. He didn't have to be there. Let's get it.
And my source tonight is the Secretary of State who is in that room today, Marco Rubio. Thank you so much, Secretary Rubio, for being here. We just heard from President Zelensky. He said he does not think that he owes President Trump an apology for what happened inside the Oval Office today. Do you feel otherwise?
I do, because you guys don't see, you guys only saw the end. You saw what happened today. You don't see all the things that led up to this. So let me explain. The president's been very clear. He campaigned on this. He thinks this war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it never would have happened. Now here we are. He's trying to bring an end to this conflict. We've explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russians to a negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible. They understand this. They also understand that this agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way, because we're involved. It's now us. It's our interests. That was all explained. That was all understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President Zelensky has made. But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington, and there was should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction, and it ended in a predictable outcome as a result. It's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to be this way, but that's the path he chose, and I think, frankly, sends his country backwards in regards to achieving peace, which is what President Trump wants at the end of the day, is for this war to end. He's been as consistent as anyone can be about what his objective is here.
But what specifically do you want to see President Zelensky apologize for?
Apologize for turning this thing into the fiasco for him that it became. There was no need for him to go in there and become antagonistic. Look, this thing went off the rails. You were there, I believe. It went off the rails when he said, let me ask you a question to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? This is a serious thing. Thousands of people have been killed, thousands. And he talks about all these horrible things that have happened to prisoners of war and children, all true, all bad. This is what we're dealing with here. It needs to come to an end. We are trying to bring it to an end. The way you bring it to an end is you get Russia to the table to talk. And he understands that. Attacking Putin, no matter how anyone may feel about him personally, forcing the president into a position where you're trying to goad him into attacking Putin, calling him names, maximalist demands about Russia having to pay for the reconstruction, all the sorts of things that you talk about in a negotiation. When you start talking about that aggressively, and the president's a deal maker, he's made deals his entire life, you're not going to get people to the table. And so you start to perceive that maybe Zelensky doesn't want a peace deal. He says he does, but maybe he doesn't. And that active, open undermining of efforts to bring about peace is deeply frustrating for everyone who's been involved in communications with them leading up to today. And I think he should apologize for wasting our time for a meeting that was going to end the way it did.
You yourself have said previously that Putin cannot be trusted in negotiations. That was the point that President Zelensky was ultimately making during that conversation is that there cannot be an agreement without security guarantees, because he was talking about all the ceasefire agreements before, or agreements that Putin has just blown past. Do you still feel that way, that Putin cannot be trusted in these negotiations?
I was there yesterday when the president said in front of the media that our approach is going to be trust but verify. President Trump's made deals his entire life. He's not going to get suckered into some deal that's not a real deal. We all understand this. We understand it on our end for certain. And so the goal here is to get to a place we have to explore whether peace is possible. I've said this repeatedly. I don't know. I think it is, based on what they've said so far, but we have to explore that. How else is this war going to end? I ask people, what is the European plan to end this war? I can tell you what one foreign minister told me, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I can tell you what one of them told me, and that is that the war goes on for another year, and at that point, Russia will feel so weakened that they'll beg for a peace. That's another year of killing, another year of dying, another year of destruction, and by the way, not a very realistic plan in my point of view. If there's a chance of peace, even if it's a 1% chance, that needs to be explored, and that's what President Trump is trying to do here.
President Trump said just when he was leaving the White House after that meeting that he doesn't think President Zelensky wants peace. But isn't that why the Ukrainian leader was in the Oval Office for that meeting today?
He was in the Oval Office to sign a minerals rights deal. That's what he was in the Oval Office to sign today. But again, when you have comments that deliberately appear to be after having discussed this repeatedly, deliberately appear to be geared towards making the argument that peace is not possible. Again, he turns to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Almost as if to say, these people, you can't deal with them. You can't have any negotiations with Putin because he can't be trusted, and you're just wasting your time on negotiations. He's directly, basically undermining everything the president has told them he's trying to do. Look, there's no need for that. You start to suspect, does he really want an end to this war? Does he just think that we have to do whatever he says and give him anything he wants without any end game? That was the Biden strategy. That was the Biden strategy. We were funding a stalemate. We were funding a meat grinder. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, the Russians have more meat to grind, and they don't care about human life. We've seen it, human waves, the North Koreans, etc. And this is a very complex thing. It's very delicate. It's very costly. It's very bloody. It needs to be brought to an end, but it isn't going to be brought to an end with public pronouncements and maximalist demands in the public, but in real diplomacy. The vice president was right.
When you say they don't care about life, are you talking about the Russians or the Ukrainians?
The Russians, they're conscripting by the hundreds of thousands. They brought in North Korean troops that were slaughtered in Kursk, and they keep going because they got more people. That's the other fact. Look, and it's, again, we go back to the same point. I'm not going to fall into this trap of the who's bad and who's evil. People can make those conclusions. People have seen how this narrative has played out and where we are today and how this all started and so forth. And the point now is it has to end. And the way it ends is you get people to a negotiating table, and the president, who's the ultimate deal maker, knows you don't get people to a negotiating table when you're calling them names and you're accusing them of things, because at the end of the day, this is not a political campaign, okay? This is high-stakes international diplomacy and an effort to bring about an end to a very dangerous war.
But you yourself, sir, have said before that you believe Putin is a war criminal. That is a widely accepted fact. You've called him a butcher. And you've said that as a Secretary of State, you do believe it's important for someone with such global influence as you have to speak with that kind of moral clarity.
Yeah, and at this moment, as Secretary of State, my job working for the president is to deliver peace, to end this conflict and end this war. Ultimately, that is the job of the State Department. The State Department doesn't fight wars, it ends them. It tries to end them. And that's usually, by the way, celebrated. Throughout history, I've watched presidents to bring about an end to wars and conflicts, and people celebrate that. They applaud it. I think we should be very proud and happy that we have a president whose prime objective is not to get into wars, but to prevent wars and to get out of wars. That is a very noble, laudable goal. Everyone should be applauding it, and he should be given the space to do that, not undermined by demands that he call Putin names or that we say things that impede the ability to conduct real diplomacy, as the vice president said today.
To follow up on what you just said a moment ago, are you saying that you have doubts that President Zelensky wants this war to come to an end?
What I have doubts about is whether he's willing to say and do the things that we need in order to get a negotiation. Again, you guys, this has been going on for 10 days, and to see things in the press saying we're not coordinating with the Ukrainians, that's absolutely false. Over the last 10 days, the Ukrainians have met with the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, the Vice President of the United States, had a phone call with President Trump, and he was in the Oval Office today. I've talked to the foreign minister of Ukraine 3 times in the last 10 days. The argument that we're not engaging, but yet you keep reading these press accounts about, oh, they're leaving us out, we're not involved, we're not engaged. None of these things are true, and it continues. So all that led up to today in a deep sense of frustration. And my hope is that this all can be reset and maturity can kick in and some pragmatism, because this war tonight, people will die in Ukraine. Tonight, people will die in this conflict. We're trying to bring an end to this conflict, which is unsustainable. It's an unsustainable, bloody war that has to come to an end. And right now, the only leader in the world that can even have a chance of bringing about an end to this is named President Donald Trump. And we need to give him the opportunity to try and do that. And when you see efforts to impede it, when you tell someone, don't say, let's not talk about these things, let's not go in this direction, because it makes it harder for us to engage, and they insist on doing it anyways, you start to wonder. I don't like to impugn people's motives, but you start to wonder what's behind it. Look, again, let's hope that this can be salvaged, but I'm not sure after today.
You don't believe that this can be, you're not sure that this can be salvaged? I mean, can this relationship between Zelensky and Trump be repaired in your view?
I think anything is possible, but it has to go back to the point that President Trump is interested in being involved in this for the purposes of bringing about an enduring and lasting peace. That's what he wants to achieve. And I think if I'm a country, okay, that's involved in a war with a bigger country, who's losing thousands of people, who's had 3 million people leave my country because they can't be there, who is facing these challenges, I would be thanking a president who's trying to help bring about an end to this war. I would be thanking him, and I would be supportive of what he's trying to do, at least in my public pronouncements and in my public posture. And we didn't see that today, and we haven't seen that for the last few days. Now, will that change? I hope so. It should, for the purposes of global peace and stability in Europe and around the world.
Now, what you're watching on the screen here is post-President Trump meeting, once they kicked his midget Ukrainian butt out of the White House, he went and got triggered, maybe having a couple drinks too many, and got on X and just started posting like a madman. This was insane. Kind of like getting messages from a crazy ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. Once you break up, they just, you open your phone, you wake up in the morning, you got 300 text messages. Let's get to Stephen Miller. He talks with Jesse Water.
Any clue that Zelensky was going to come in hot like this?
I don't think anybody had any idea that Zelensky would be so impertinent, so disrespectful, so insulting to the United States of America. Look, this is one of the great moments in the history of American diplomacy. The way that President Trump and J.D. Vance stood up for American interests on the world stage, the way that President Trump defended Americans after years of being fleeced and abused and taken advantage of and taken for granted, millions of American hearts swelled with overflowing pride today to watch President Trump put Zelensky in his place. The only reason that Zelensky has a country, that Zelensky is in power, is because of the United States. Americans have suffered economically, funding this war now for years. American security has been degraded, our stockpiles depleted, our ability to project power in other regions of the world negatively affected to protect and defend Ukraine. Americans probably don't even know the true extent of just how much military support on multiple levels and fronts America has provided to Ukraine. And then this man shows up in the Oval Office and lectures us, says we have to do more, says we're not as good as Europe, says that we need to provide them a forever war guarantee, fight Russia till the end of time. No American watching that today says they want to send their sons and daughters to die on behalf of Zelensky. And President Trump was clear and firm and principled, saying either you're our partner for peace in ending this war, or we can't work with you. And Zelensky, for the first time since this has begun, finally met a Western leader willing to assert their own interests, the interests of their own country, and not bow down to and venerate this man as a messianic figure. Americans have watched with horror as Zelensky has been treated as a messiah. Our hearts all break for the suffering and loss and death. What would be even worse? World War III. And today, President Trump said, we are not going to let this escalate into World War III. He defended the Oval Office, he defended the White House, and most importantly, he defended the American people. And I was honored and proud to be there to witness this moment in history.
What was so confusing is that Zelensky doesn't have a second option. It's not like there's other great nations that he can just turn to sponsor this proxy war. He doesn't even have Europeans willing to step up and help him out to the level that we are. So to me, this was a kamikaze mission. It was almost like he was unbalanced to come in here and explode like that. Any normal, rational person would have come in, been gracious, shown some gratitude. Where do I sign? Let's move forward and let's get this deal done. The fact that he didn't do that kind of scares me.
He couldn't even say thank you.
No.
Just couldn't say thank you. Thank you, America.
And that's like diplomacy 101.
Us.
That's what they tell you to say on the plane. You're about to meet the president. He loves to hear thank you. The American people need to hear that. Say that right away.
But it was not just that, though. There were many remarkable and disturbing things that Zelensky said. He repeatedly rejected President Trump's statement that we should pursue a ceasefire. How could you reject a ceasefire? And he kept saying Europe's doing so much more than us. Then what do you need us for? If he's saying Europe's so great, then why are you coming and begging and pleading to us for money and protection and guarantees? President Trump is a peacemaker. He will fight for peace. He had peace for 4 years under his previous term. And today we saw what it's like to have a strong leader in the White House, and the whole world saw what it's like to have a strong leader for America.
All right, well, I think they're going to patch things up. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think they will. Stephen Miller, have a great...
Guys, if you're still here at this point, if you don't mind smashing that thumbs up button for your boy, that goes a long way into helping me out. Also, if you're not yet subscribed, hopefully this could be the video that earns your subscription. Now, let's get to Susan Rice, who is peddling propaganda here, saying that the Trump-Zelensky meeting was a complete setup by the White House. Maybe she forgot that it was Zelensky's idea to go to Washington. Let's get it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that thumbs up button for your boy. It goes a long way to help me out. And also, if it's not your first time here and you're not yet subscribed, hopefully this could be the video I earn your subscription. Peace out, everybody.
Yeah, listen. We fucked up.
Well, Nicole, obviously it's a very sad day and an embarrassment for the United States on the world stage. But let's step back and analyze what's happened here. I think there's no question that this was a setup. You heard Donald Trump say at the end of that clip you played, this is great television. This was a setup. Volodymyr Zelensky was compelled to agree to a horrible deal that would have sent Ukraine's minerals to the United States without any concrete security guarantees. And yet, because he was trying to improve a relationship with Donald Trump, he came to Washington, he came to the Oval Office, and sat down for a meeting, hat in hand. And soon after he got there, the vice president of the United States lit into him and started a confrontation. Now, I've been in countless Oval Office meetings with heads of state, presidents and vice presidents, as national security advisor, as UN ambassador, and in other roles. I can tell you that the vice president or the secretary of state or anybody else, they don't jump in, hijack a conversation without the express blessing of the president of the United States. So J.D. Vance did that deliberately. Donald Trump knew what he was going to do. And I think, as he said at the end, because he can't, help himself, this was a setup for the cameras. It was a play to his base. But above all, it was a play to Vladimir Putin, to show fealty to Vladimir Putin, and to try to humiliate